High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye home run. Don Mattingly. Tuck waits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our division previews here on Table Setters. As always, I am Steve, joined my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? It is the National League East, the National League Beast tonight. A couple things here. Interestingly enough, they are one of only two divisions to have one team in it that has never won the division. Two teams that are very much related, the Marlins and the Rockies over there in the NL West. 30-something seasons, no division titles. They've had some success, especially the Marlins, but no division titles. And on the other side of the spectrum, the Braves, the longest division title streak in MLB history. At one point from 1991 to 2005, the Braves won 14 straight NL East division titles. And that was basically how I grew up as a Met fan.
I was
Just
about to say that
despising the Atlanta
it molded
Braves.
you, gave you adversity
Oh,
as a kid. It made sure you knew you had to go through some struggles as a sports fan.
yeah, man. Turner Field was just a place, house of horrors, which made the Lindor home run last year all that more shocking, and that crazy doubleheader they had the day after the season ended to determine who was going to the playoffs. Interestingly enough, no other MLB team in history has even had a streak of 10 consecutive division titles. So the Braves with 14 is just insane. Although they didn't really get a ton of postseason success in that streak, were 1-4 in the World Series during that streak. So this year, I mean, the National League as a whole is strong, and the National League East, other than the Dodgers, may be where the most strength and talent lies in the in the league as a whole.
So Devin set the stage here. We, of course, have been going through our division previews. We have two left, the two East, the National League East and the American League East. But if you guys missed any of our previews from last week, go back in the archives and check them out. Prime me for the season that is, especially as we approach the Tokyo series that is taking place on the 18th, fresh in the morning, 6 a.m. start time over there. So you guys get your day started and your travels or whatever and try to peek at it as you start your work day. But we are here talking about the National League East, and Devin mentioned it. It stands to me head and shoulders above a lot of the divisions, compelling baseball drama, of course. And Devin mentioned the history of the rivalry and really the evolution of these team identities. We look at the season contenders, and it seems like these owners, for the most part, outside of just one team egregiously sitting there, want to win. They're all aiming for a World Series. And I think looking at the organizations, as you said, I think each of them have a unique flair that they could probably have a good case to be made. If you were tasked like the old assignments in school where they said, play this side of the court case and tell us why the Atlanta Braves, tell us why the Philadelphia Phillies, tell us why the New York Mets will be in the World Series of the last team standing. I think you can make a solid case for all these teams. And I think you and I are going to be doing that in this episode.
Yeah, there are clear strengths and clear weaknesses. It just so happens the talent and the top tier type of talent that is on those three rosters you just talked about it's tough to compare. It really is. And it's going to come down to things such as chemistry and injuries and lack of injuries and who steps up in place of injuries. That's what it's going to come down to, depth. And honestly, we mentioned the Marlins also, but we didn't mention the Nationals very much. They're a super interesting team this year because you're starting to see them turn that corner, so much young talent. So who knows what role they're going to play in this division this year. It's kind of a wait and see. And I don't know if we're going to have a feel of things in April or if it's going to take a few months to really start to feel like, who is the team to beat in this division this year.
Well, let's start right there, too. Let's a team that was snake bitten last year. We have the Atlanta Braves poised for a redemption story if they have it their way, injury riddled in 2024. And it starts and ends with Ronald Acuna Jr., his dynamic play, 5-tool abilities. But of course, you look at the other side of the ball, Spencer Strider, strikeout power, overwhelming opponents, making them look silly. These are two critical assets returning to the team, and it complements on the other side of things Chris Sale, the reigning and defending NL Cy Young winner. And then on top of that, emerging talent that we saw last year, Spencer Spallenberg. before we start talking about the weaknesses, I think some of the strengths are based on those 4 players. There are question marks, of course, that you can put in the weakness category, but if you're starting a team with those 4 players, I think it's better, to me, like that's a really good starting point. But again, the questions still remain about Ronald Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider coming back from really significant injuries.
Yeah, that is probably the biggest question going into the season. What are they going to get from those two guys? Spencer Strider, I believe, penciled in to start for the Braves. I think tomorrow, if not tomorrow, very early. If you're listening to it Monday, it would be today. Very early in the week, I believe he's gonna get a start here. May seems to be the timeline for Ronald Acuna Jr. But it's not just when they're going to come back. It's what are they going to look like? Are they going to be handled with kid gloves early a little bit? Are they going to be careful? Or are they going to let them go? Those two are so critical, not only to the team, but to the division. But there are so many other questions as well. I think Braves fans can be very confident that Matt Olson, you know what? I giggled before when you said they were snake bit because, yeah, they were like so many injuries and they still were a playoff team. Like they still were a playoff team and had a bunch of wins. It's just crazy. Everything they went through last year, whether it be players having down years or players going out with season ending injuries, they still managed to get in. Just insane. And what I think saved them is the Chris Sale trade, which at the time, I don't know if anyone knew how that was going to go. We haven't seen Chris Sale be Chris Sale in many, many years. And it turned out to be one hell of a move. But yeah, Strider, Acuna, huge. Matt Olson, I think most people are believing he'll have a bounce back. And again, you look at his numbers at the end of the year, they weren't that bad. But during the season, you could feel that Matt Olson wasn't exactly Matt Olson. A guy like Ozzy Albies got to stay on the field. He's been not just snake bitten last year, but for a few years now with different kinds of injuries. My wonder, other than Acuna and Strider, is listen, I own Chris Sale in fantasy baseball. And to be honest, taking him in the 7th round last year was one of the reasons I was able to overcome a Garrett Cole injury to my team early in the season and go on to win another championship. Chris Sale was a huge part of that, even though, towards the end of the year, he faded towards the playoffs with injuries and back problems. But looking on the outside, my question for guys that are going to be there, and I know he's looked great in spring, but can Chris Sale go out there and play for a full season again? Like, can he get through the season again without any type of injuries, even if they're just little nagging things here and there that keep him out, a couple weeks at a time? I'm not talking about major stuff. I'm certainly not wishing anything upon them, even though I'm a Mets fan. Like, I want every team at their best. But that would be my concern. This rotation at the top is good, but you do wonder about the depth a little bit. So, like, if you lose a Chris Sale or maybe a Strider doesn't give you a whole lot this year and takes a little bit of time for him to get back, who's stepping up in that rotation that we might not be thinking about?
Yeah, and the other piece too, with the year from Marcell Ozuna, no one expected that last year. I think a big piece why they were able to come and be at where they were in a wild card spot, overcoming all they did was the adversity. Uh, that was kind of offset by a Marcell Ozuna, and we have to expect that we're going to see Ozuna be somewhat of the player we saw last year. I think the down year was maybe exaggerated. There was a lot of off field, maybe self-imposed distractions on his end that were getting in the way, but people were writing him off as a player of the past. So
Yeah,
Ozuna was a huge, for sure. He was a huge piece. And the addition of Jerickson Profar is certainly fascinating to me. What we saw from Profar, once a top prospect, we saw everything that he was being touted as, then becoming a forgotten player post hype is a real deal thing for him. But then watching what he did in San Diego last year was masterful. And he became this dynamic player that we're all expecting. Projections have him taking a little bit of a dip, but in that lineup surrounded by Austin Riley, you mentioned Matt Olson, we just talked about Ozuna, and eventually Ronald Acuna Jr. when he gets back. Feels like this is a 1 through 9 lineup that could be kind of a turnkey situation. You got to look at Jarred Kelenic too. Like Jarred Kelenic's in this lineup as well. And I understand like he is another post-hype type of player that on their end, when you look at a guy like Kelenic, the Braves system has a way of bringing the best out of some of these players. And I think Kelenic being there, I think there's a great location for him. And then being kind of in a no pressure number 9 spot in their projected lineup, I like that spot for Kelenic. There's some holes in the lineup, of course. Like we look at Drake Baldwin slotted as their starting catcher this year. What are they going to get from that? I mean, catcher's in a downhill slide for a lot of different teams, so it's not that egregious. But defensively, I think they're going to be looking to get mostly things out of him. But offense I do like. I mean, but the thing is, you have to get the maximum out of Riley, Olsen, Acuna, and that's asking a lot because you didn't get that last year. So we can't make the assumption they will be healthy. They're going to have to overcome again. But if we look at last year being rock bottom, snake bitten, whatever word you want to use to describe the season, they were still a playoff team, as you mentioned. So to me, the Braves come in as the favorites of this division just because of what they've done in the past, and feels like last year, similar to Texas Rangers when we talked about the AL West, as an outlier more so than the common factor.
Yeah, I mean, Drake Baldwin, number one prospect for the Braves, which is, listen, usually number one prospects work out pretty decently for this franchise. I think he could come up here, and again, no pressure because he's got so much offense around him, doesn't have to be the guy. I think he's going to come up here and open eyes, to be honest. I think he's just going to be another great cog in that offensive machine, and we're going to be rolling our eyes. And I say we, as for me and other Met fans, like, really, they just got another guy. They just, it's just one after the next. I think he's going to be really, really good. But the other, Jared Kelenic, you call him post hype. He was in a Brave uniform last year, and I thought the same thing. Like, oh man, the Braves are going to turn this guy to gold too. He didn't impress me much last year. He doesn't look great in spring. Kind of the same stuff we've seen from him. Low batting average. Just, it never seems to really click. When he hits a home run, it's impressive, and it's like, oh man, here he goes. I feel like he's never gotten on a roll. I think he could potentially go from post hype to post hope very quickly, to be honest. But again, the Braves don't necessarily need him. And you're right. No pressure situation for him. Braves don't need a ton out of him. So, like, it's not as big a deal as when he was in Seattle and they were desperate for offense. I think Michael Harris Jr. is due for an unbelievable year. I think maybe he was battling through some nagging injuries. Hell of a defender, but I think the offense kind of comes to play a little more this year. When I look at the bottom of the rotation, this is what I was alluding to before. Grant Holmes, Ian Anderson. Ian Anderson, it feels like he's been out for a million years. So who knows what we get from him. Grant Holmes has looked pretty good in spring. And again, if Spencer Strider can come back by the end of April or something, one of those guys could move to the bullpen. Everyone loves Spencer Schwellenbach. He's like the darling of fantasy baseball players this year. And for good reason. He's got great stuff. Another guy, I think, AJ Smith-Shawver, only 22 years old. Like, people forget how young he is. And again, that's post hype. Like, he came up and had several chances, never blew anyone away. But again, a guy that looks good in spring. Ronaldo Lopez, this is, Clay Holmes type of guy as far as taken from a reliever to a starter role. Very, very successful. I remember when we did the sub-2 ERA crew last year for the first several months of the season. He kept on hanging around in there and was one of the last people standing. His velocity's been down pretty significantly in the spring, but people talk about a dead arm period about halfway through spring training. That's pretty normal. So not too much to read into that now. But if you see that in mid-April still, then you start to kind of wonder. And I will say, I don't think they're necessarily I think they're a rotation that they could deal with one injury to the rotation. If you start getting two injuries to the rotation, three injuries, I don't know how deep they are there. But Braves, man, like, it's the best offense in the league aside from the Dodgers, and on any given day, maybe as good or better than the Dodgers. Seriously, if they're healthy.
There's a great article that you guys should check out. It was made this weekend. Jay Jaffe posted it on Fangraphs about Ronald Acuna Jr., and it's titled Ronald Acuna Jr.'s eventual return comes into focus, and just gives a really good synopsis of the path, the injury, some quotes from hitting coaches, and talking about where Ronald Acuna Jr. is and what it means to come back from an ACL injury and how significant that is. So a great article. Jay Jaffe does a great job over there on Fangraphs. Looking at just their offseason assessment, I mean, they were conservative, as we mentioned. Jerickson Profar joins the team, but I think, again, there's a lot riding on the Profar signing, because I think him being good and being a solid leadoff hitter, even let's just say 85% of what we saw in San Diego, we could be looking at a completely different lineup. As you mentioned before, those guys that are the staples of that lineup, the Austin Rileys, the Matt Olsons, the eventual Ronald Acuna Jr.'s, the Michael Harris. I don't think we spoke about him enough. I know you said you think he's in for a big year, but there's a lot of these guys that are cemented in this lineup. And I believe that this front office knows what this team is. And if you add on top of it Profar with the dynamic speed at the top of the lineup, I think we can be looking at a lineup that's even more dangerous, which is crazy to say, because as you mentioned, they're just a smidge behind where the Dodgers are offensively. In a lot of ways, I kind of like the Braves lineup better just because I feel like it has more versatility.
I do when they're healthy. I honestly, it's a hard decision, obviously, coin flip kind of, but yeah, you could argue that, and like, there's a good argument to be made. Really, the only hole in that lineup, and this is kind of public enemy number one for Braves fans nowadays, is Orlando Arcia. Like he held it down for a little while there when he was first acquired by the Brewers. I think the goodwill for Arcia has kind of worn thin. He's hitting really poorly in spring and spring training, but he's the weak spot. And you see this lineup full of powerhouses. And really, if as an outsider, you say the Braves fans shouldn't complain, but they want someone more capable there. Nick Allen has been having a good spring. He's more of a bench guy, but I have seen Braves fans calling for him to be the starter on opening day. I don't think it'll happen. I think Orlando Arcia will be the guy. But yeah, that's really the only, I guess, quote unquote weak spot you could say in the Braves lineup. Pretty crazy just to have one guy like that. And at his best, he's not that bad either.
For sure. Well, let's move over to the New York Mets here, and obviously made headlines by securing a superstar Juan Soto. I mean, but for God's sakes, we did a emergency episode about the signing here. This boosts their already powerful offense. We saw what they were able to do last year. Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso is back. I think the offense itself is very dynamic. I know there's some hate on Mark Vientos out there in the fantasy baseball community. We heard it first on with CBS Sports. They don't like the advanced statistics, but I think if we look at what Vientos did, it's hard for me to buy into him having a worse year than he did last year when you surround him with even more talent. It makes sense that Vientos would just have a better year, even accidentally at this point, because of again, being surrounded by Soto and Lindor again and Pete Alonso. Vientos, to me, feels like he's a player that's primed to take the next step up. I mean, the biggest question mark, and I'll let you take the lead on this, obviously, is the injuries for the pitching staff. Frankie Montas, become public enemy number one as far as pitching goes for the Mets at this point. Sean Manaea's injury, can we get that? Kodai Senga, like, what will he be? I think that is a huge piece to this team as well. The instability could compromise aspirations, but we look at this Mets team and what they were able to accomplish last year with middle of the year, no expectations, especially with how they started the year. I'm curious as a Met fan looking at the way the expectations sit here, because there has to be more than just hope looking at the Soto sign, even for casual fans. People are going to pack that ballpark from the jump, hopefully be energetic, but the Mets have to play well from the jump. And it's a long season. We saw it last year. They got off to the worst start you could potentially get off to, and they got off the mat and had a magical run. Do you feel like it's important for the Mets to have a really hot start to get this fan base energized and it doesn't become this woe is me mentality?
No, one of the lessons I learned last year was it's going to be early for a while. The Mets had about as bad of a start to the season as they possibly could, and then an even worse May, and just looked dead in the water. And then several things happened to turn the season around. I'm not saying you can be as bad in April and May again and just hope that that's going to happen. They certainly need to be better than that, because I think, if they do that again, there's a bigger chance that the Braves and Phillies bury them a little more this time. Or other teams around the National League as far as the wild card goes. But it's a long season, so I say this now. It's going to be different when I've been watching for 2 or 3 weeks. But I don't think we can panic if their start is not red hot right away. I think it could take some time. But you nailed it. The rotation is question number one. It's just this weird thing where they have this potentially great offense now. Some of the greatest offensive players in the league, Lindor and Juan Soto, and some big powerhouses like Alonso and Vientos, and on and on. I mean, Nimmo is a pretty good offensive player. Francisco Alvarez, when he's healthy, is a pretty good offensive player. Like, you can go up and down the lineup. It's pretty good stuff there. And I think some fans just feel like the rotation doesn't match. Like, how can you go get Soto and then give us this rotation? Like, if you're getting Soto and giving him that money, it's like win now for the next 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of. But I think David Stearns and Steve Cohen deserve a little bit of our trust right now with what they've done in the brief time together. So I, as a Met fan, will give them that trust. Obviously, not ideal to have 2 starting pitchers and Manaea and Montas out to start the season. Montas, I feel like, will be out longer for sure. Manaea, I was very happy to hear that he started throwing program already a couple days ago. I did not see that coming. I thought maybe we hear that in the beginning of the regular season, not the last week or two of spring. So maybe he's back sooner than we thought when we first heard of it. Said he's throwing with no pain in the oblique. So that's a good sign. We need that dude. Kodai Senga is so important because I know Clay Holmes is starting opening day, but like, can we really put that pressure on him right away? A guy who's just turning back into a starter, like, needs to be our ace right away. And if he is, cool. Like, if he's great, awesome. That's amazing. Going to make David Stearns look like even more of a genius. But Kodai Senga is the guy that has shown us before that he can be an ace. Like he was an ace in 2023. He's got to be healthy. Struggled a little bit in spring here and there. Still has one of the best pitches as far as the ghost fork. One of the best swing and miss pitches in the league when he's right. So we'll see what we get from him. That's going to be huge. But the rotation, man, what's weird to me, the Griffin Canning signing stood out as very strange to me because the Braves acquired him in that Soler deal to the Angels and then just DFA'd the dude a couple days later. If the Braves are just getting rid of you, like usually the Braves can turn guys into good pieces. That felt weird to me, but obviously someone in the Mets organization, whether it be someone in the pitching lab or Jeremy Hefner or David Stearns himself, sees something in him that they think can be valuable. He may be relied on to be the fifth starter in the beginning of the year. Paul Blackburn, who we acquired at the deadline and only gave us a couple starts before he got hurt, is probably going to have to give us some innings. Tyler McGill looks like actually the front runner for the 5 spot. So guys are going to have to step up. We'll see. You don't want it to be the kind of team where the offense just has to beat people to death all year to hang around because usually even great offenses are going to slump from time to time. So I worry about that a little bit. The Vientos thing, sophomore slump you alluded to, I don't think there's any reason to sit here and be like he's going to have a sophomore slump. I like Mark Vientos a lot. I like his makeup. I think he'll be fine. We'll see. He's a guy, when you talk about fast starts, he's the kind of guy who maybe he needs to get off to a fast start so he can start feeling good really early and not start to feel this pressure of those, things he's hearing about a sophomore slump. And the other guy that I have to say worried, I think I'm always worried about him, is Edwin Diaz. I said this last year. I'm going to say it again. Like we got one unbelievable year out of Edwin Diaz where he looked like the best relief pitcher on the planet. And then he got hurt. Super unfortunate in the World Baseball Classic celebration. And last year, velocity was down a little bit. There'd be times he looked great, times he'd scare you to death, and times he would blow it, walk the bases loaded, things like that. He is the kind of guy who can put guys on and then get out of it because he can strike guys out at a high rate. But I do worry about him a little bit. There's been some notes about velocities down for him in spring. Carlos Mendoza is trying to calm everyone down, saying it's not a big deal. Of course, he's got to say that. So you wonder about him. He's such a big piece to this team, man. Like in a division like this, you can't be blowing leads late. He's such a huge, huge piece. So I do worry about him a little bit. And just one other note is Pete Alonso batting behind Juan Soto. It's a big opportunity for Pete. Soto's going to be on a lot. Lindor's going to be on a lot. Pete Alonso's going to be batting a lot with 2 guys on, nobody out. We'll see what he can do, man. I almost feel like he'd benefit more from batting in front of Soto because he'll get more pitches to look at with pitchers not wanting him, to be on for Soto, who's coming after. So I don't know. We'll see. Mendoza's proved he's not afraid of changing things around. He's not just going to sit there kind of like Aaron Boone has been criticized for, just kind of letting things ride for too long and not being proactive. Mendoza, one thing I love about him is he does mix things up. Not afraid to take guys out of certain spots and mix it up. So I think he'll do it if he has to. I mean, Lindor was the 3-hitter when the year started last year, and now we just know him as a great leadoff hitter. So, yeah,
Well,
I'm hopeful, but it's a tough division.
Fangraphs predicts them for an 86-win season, which is good enough in my mind to challenge for a wild card. That's all they really need to get in there, and I think projections like Atlanta and Philly a little bit more. That doesn't mean that's our pick. Doesn't mean that's what's going to happen because projections are just that. They're projections. They put them in the Zips machine. Computer starts to generate some printouts for it, and I think the whole obviously is looking at that pitching stat. But I will ask everybody out there, if you are interested in this type of stuff, Baseball Savant, as Devin always references here on the show, go to Clay Holmes' page and check out some of the induced break on some of these pitches. And it's fascinating to me. It feels like he is going to be taking that step that we saw Seth Lugo take with Kansas City, getting the opportunity to go long form without the pressure of closing. Because as Yankee fans know, and I watch Clay Holmes very closely, it wasn't about the stuff. It wasn't about the velocity. It was about the pressure situation. And you referenced this with Edwin Diaz, where it's a completely different thing, where one mistake ends the game or potentially ruins the opportunity for your team to win. If Clay Holmes has the wiggle room, the safety net of, hey, I can give up 2 runs and I'm still in this game, I can still lead my team in here, it could change the whole mentality. I'm excited to see what Clay Holmes does. As a Yankee fan, I think he got a really bad rap. Obviously, Luke Weaver and became the apple of everybody's eye last year. He was the hot guy. And I certainly would trade off Clay Holmes for Devin Williams, etc. Put Luke Weaver in the 8th spot. But that's not to say I didn't like Clay Holmes. He was a very good Yankee. And I think people look at, they're so quick to compare these relievers to Mariano Rivera. And Mariano Rivera is a unicorn. You don't get that type of guy who's as lock solid and not going to blow saves. But I mean, even Mariano had his down days. So Clay Holmes as a starter, that is an X factor for this Mets team that could be game changing. If you get Kodai Senga being who we think he could be, this international prospect, highly touted, and then Clay Holmes comes in here and replicates similar to Seth Lugo, because I can't help but compare to Seth Lugo what we saw from Lugo in Kansas City. And looking at what the Mets are doing with the pitching labs and the health, Severino came out and was talking about just in general, just the Mets doctors and just the health centric approach that they have for these players. They could discover something in Holmes and unlock something that we've always known, because he is absolutely nasty. People get so stuck on the highlights where he gives up and blows a save. But look at the advanced stats for Clay Holmes. This guy is 31 years old. He still has his best years in front of him. And to think, as a reliever, there's not that many innings on this arm. So you can go out there and probably get a little bit more. And if they can unlock something with him, that he could be the key to a potential championship season. I really feel that.
Yeah, I mean, if he ends up being that good, and like you said, Senga can be Senga, and the Manaea comes back and can be the Manaea we saw last year, suddenly you're looking at a very questionable rotation turn into a really, really good rotation. I'll wrap up on this. I could talk about the Mets all day, obviously, but with Soto, one thing, and obviously everyone wants to knock his defense. I get it. I love what they did. I mean, they already had Tyrone Taylor here and Bader, they let walk, who's also a great defender. But you get Jose Siri here, who's one of the best defenders in the league. I know he's going to drive us crazy at bat. He's going to hit some bombs and then strike out a million times in a row. But, like, he protects – the two of them protect Soto as the right fielder, whereas the Yankees, don't get me wrong, Aaron Judge, for his size, is a really good center fielder for his size. But is he going to cover as much ground as a Jose Siri, Tyrone Taylor? No. So you're a little more protected if you're Juan Soto in right field, in my opinion, with those two guys being able to range over. And Soto's also motivated. He said, like, he wants his defense to improve. His offense is going to be there. I mean, that seems pretty certain. So, yeah, excited, optimistic, but also realistic. There's two other really, really good teams in this division. So can't wait to get it started, though.
So Mets fans, within the sound of my voice, show up early and often to this ballpark and make this team, excited. Because every other team, I feel like if the money that was spent for this team, there needs to be something from the fans to show up. I know Steve Cohen came out and said stuff, and he got a lot of grief for this, for saying, obviously he had dates in mind too. He came at receipts talking about certain series where the Mets fans didn't show up. And I understand it's cold in the Northeast and there's a lot to do and people are hard to get off work and stuff, but you guys have been waiting. Not a Met fan by any means, but the Mets fans have been waiting for a contender, waiting for a reason to celebrate this team, and have an opportunity to own this city, fresh off a Yankees World Series, by the way. The Yankees are the defending American League champions, and the Mets are the talk of the town too right now. So come out and show up for this team. I think that the Mets fans need to do that.
I think they will. I do. I especially with him calling them out, I think they will.
So let's move over to the Phillies here. Of course, Philadelphia's lineup is a blend of some seasoned stars. We look at Bryce Harper. We look at Trey Turner. Obviously, it is both dangerous and dynamic if all things go well. You also look at Alec Boehm. He was the circles of some trade rumors as well. Kyle Schwarber. Nick Castellanos is a year older at this point, so obviously we have to feel like what we're going to get out of him. JT Realmuto. It feels like the bottom half of this lineup is a little bit more aging than it happened pretty quick here. I think the decline related to age is happening pretty quickly here. There's an injury risk that comes with that inherently. And there's some performance variability with that when you look at some of these guys that are getting older. The other fascinating thing that we'll talk as we continue to go forward in the season is Realmuto and Schwarber are nearing free agency. So their window right now to win for the Phillies is kind of closing. And this Phillies window, I mean, I don't think anyone expected it to be this long drawn 15-year contending period, and they'll find a way to open it in their own ways. But this identity of the team, it almost feels like this might be the last year of this group, this World Series group that we saw a few years ago, the Harpers, the dancing. What's the song that they were singing, Dancing in the Dark, or whatever that song was that they were all hyped up in
Bryson
Philly.
Stott song. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Either way, like that, it feels like we're about to turn the page on that. And this is almost the last opportunity to get a ring out of this group. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I actually had the very similar note where I said, do any of the Phillies vets show signs of decline? I think they maybe do for some regression in certain places. Like they're not super old, but they definitely have, for baseball terms, some guys that have a lot of wear and tear on them over the years, a lot of miles on them. So I do think they might be due for some of that. The rotation is as good as any rotation in baseball. You could make an argument for it being the best rotation in baseball. Um, I mean, it's interesting. There were a lot of rumors after the season when they kind of fell shorter than anyone expected them for like, all right, this is going to be the offseason where they make some changes. Maybe Castellanos gets traded. Alec Baum, he probably is going to get traded. And neither one happened. So they pretty much stay put. Add a guy like Max Kepler. Jesus Luzardo is a pretty big addition if he's right. I think we saw that one game where he gave up in spring 3 straight home runs on 3 pitches. So he's a weird guy. He's another guy that can look like the best pitcher on earth for a couple innings and then look unbelievably hittable as well. So we'll see with Jesus Luzardo, but 1-5, unbelievable rotation. Obviously, Zach Wheeler is one of the best pitchers in the league, if not the best. There could be an argument for that. Just so damn dependable. A guy that the Mets probably should never have let walk. One interesting thing to look at is the bullpen this year. You know, Jeff Hoffman and Carlos Estevez are gone. They walked out the door. They did acquire or sign Jordan Romano after the Blue Jays let him go, but we haven't seen the Jordan Romano, the dominant Jordan Romano that we knew of for a couple years now. You know, mostly due to injury kind of stuff, but he's a huge X factor for them. I mean, I've been pushing for a while. Like, you have Orion Kerkering that right there with one of the nastiest pitches in the league. Like, just give him the chance at closer. I'm almost glad as a Met fan that they have not done that. I feel like at one of these days he's going to be the most dominant closer in the league. Maybe I'm wrong, but you look at some of the advanced statistics with how these pitches have moved. It's unbelievable. So the bullpen will be something to watch. Like, can Jordan Romano secure that closer role and do a good job there? But I'm mostly looking at the veterans in the offense. I mean, the rotation, Wheeler and Nola and Ranger Suarez, they have a lot of mileage on them as well. I mean, Christopher Sanchez, the young gun there, but those other three, they have a lot of mileage. Like, so if they don't stay as healthy as they have for the last several years, who steps up? The obvious answer is Andy Painter, right? Great in the Arizona Fall League after an injury situation, right there at the top of the prospect list again. I would be surprised if we don't see him, which is weird because the 1-5, if everyone stays healthy, like, who is he replacing? That's a tough question to answer because 1-5, you have some pretty big names. But I do think at some point we see Andy Painter in there, and that's a pretty good guy to fill in. And I have Mick Abel, who I haven't heard a lot about in the last year or so either. At one point was a very high prospect, but for the Phillies, man, I think this might be the year. And I know sometimes we just pie in the sky. I could see this being the year, partly because of what you just said. Maybe this being the last version of, or the last iteration of this version of the team. I think this might be the year they make a legitimate run at Mike Trout, getting him in here in Philly. Outfield has always been kind of the weaker spot for them the last few years. Maybe this is the time they try to push it over the edge and bring Mike Trout here and see what can happen. I do see a world where that's reality.
Man, I would love to see that. I honestly would. I mean, he's a Philly guy, Eagles fan. He's from Jersey. Like, he is part of that Philly culture. And I think it could be exciting for a lot of fans to see him in that limelight. I think Philly offers a different stage. Obviously, we've seen it. By the way, it's Dancing on My Own by Tiesto is the song that we were hearing being played all throughout Philly, throughout that World Series run where they ultimately fell short. The interesting thing you were saying about the bullpen lineup here, I'm looking at RotoChamp, which Jordan Romano is slotted for the potential role as the closer.
Yeah.
But Kerkering on Fangraphs is out there as the closer, as they slotted him there, where Jose Alvarado is the setup guy. And it's kind of mix and match here. But Romano has the experience. You mentioned injury riddled, and we've seen him in big spots before, but obviously his closing days are few and far between at this point because he had a lot of time on the shelf. I like the idea of Kerkering getting that job straight from spring. I don't think we're going to see that, but I think obviously you mentioned the baseball savant and all the projections of his pitches and what he brings to the table. Let him go out there, dude. This guy can go out there and cement that spot. Like, why? We kind of already know what Jordan Romano is. You know what I mean? Like, why are we going to play that game for the first 2 months of the season? If you're Philadelphia, go out there with the kid. I don't know. Like, in my opinion, I think it's a better opportunity to get something electric and all of a sudden establish this guy who maybe is too naive to understand the pressure. Like, do you feel that way? I mean, Jordan Romano kind of like he's faced some adversity. You can use that as a good thing. Like this well-seasoned veteran that has overcome and nothing's going to shake him. But in the other regard, when things go bad, Jordan Romano has seen it grow really bad. So I think Kerkering to
Yeah.
me would be the better option if I had the pencil.
Yeah, I think Romano gets the chance in the beginning of the year. I just think that from what I've read, that's what's going to happen. But again, a lot of injury problems. So like if he gets hurt again or isn't good, who steps up? I know Alvarado's had closing experience, but man, just give the job to the kid. I don't think it's naivety. I think he's just going to be good. I think he wants it. I think he's good. I took him in last year's fantasy drafts, late, where you kind of take some shots at people, thinking like this guy's definitely going to be the closer there in a couple months. And obviously, I was wrong. It never happened, and he's still not. But I just see that in him. I see him being a dominant closer one day. It's just in my mind, a matter of time.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rotation. I think a big question mark or potential asset is Jesus Luzardo. About he was a guy that understated, injury riddled in this division before. By the way, like he's also had
Yeah.
experience pitching in the NL East. I don't think he's going to be this huge asset, but again, depth in that rotation, as you said before, Zach Wheeler might be the best pitcher, not just the National League, but all of the league put together. Add in Aaron Nola as well. I mean, like you said, they might have the best rotation. So any of the riches go above the abundance of what they have. So if Jesus Luzardo is any bit as good or what we were thinking he could have been years ago, that could be something that would be helping the Phillies get over the top.
Yeah, I just want to see the Phillies and Braves just beat each other up all year. Like let the Mets lie in wait. Like the Phillies and Braves had a little bit of beef the last year or so with Bryce Harper and I think Garcia were kind of going at each other, like doing different things. So maybe that carries over. That's must see TV. Phillies Braves, man. Like all these matchups in the NL East are pretty spectacular. But let's get to the team that we mentioned earlier. As far as I think it's a development year for them still. I don't tell them that these players on this squad are going to go out there to win, but the Washington Nationals. I mean, ever since the Juan Soto trade to San Diego, the Washington fans, I think, have understood, all right, now it's a build up, right, to the next great group that can maybe go out there and suddenly win a World Series like Juan Soto's Washington Nationals did when he was a youngster. CJ Abrams has been there. Obviously, you had the issue last year with curfew, and my guess is that is nipped in the bud. I don't think we're going to see any of that again. Who knows? But I think he'll be fine. I think really to me, there's not a ton to talk about here, even though they're an exciting team. I think the story is a full season of Dylan Cruz and James Wood. Like, what's that going to look like? Those two guys playing for the full year. I think that's fun. They have some other guys down in the minors. Like, they still have more to come up. Robert Hassel was a guy who played. He was in that deal, in the Soto deal, and he kind of disappeared after a little while. It seems like his stock is going back up. Arizona Fall League, really, really good. He's played well in spring. Brady House is another guy. Like they have more down there ready to come up soon enough. The pitching is really the question to me. Like 1 through 5, it's a good group, but I don't feel like there's when you look at it, is there really a guy? Is Mackenzie Gore that guy yet where you're like, we need a stopper. Our number one is going to go out there today and stop this losing streak. He's shown signs of being really, really good, but I don't see him as that number one. So this rotation to me is like a number two, maybe 2 number 2s, a couple number 3s, and a number 4 or 5. And they have a little depth too. Like they're going to go in 1 to 5, and they're going to have a couple guys not make the team that are capable of helping them. So I don't hate the rotation by any means. I think there's some talent there. It's pretty young. A guy like Jake Irvin has shown signs of being really, really good at times too. Maybe he takes the next step. DJ Hers maybe gives us some more. He had a couple electric outings last year, but like overall, I don't know if it's maybe not ready for prime time yet. I think they're going to be really fun. But I think if you're a National fan, you're looking at like, all right, let's see how these guys develop. And then I think 2026 is the year you're looking at like, all right, this is the time we make a run. Like this is the time that we're putting our foot in the door. A lot of people have picked them to be like the surprise team this year. Like they're going to shock the world. I don't think so. I'm not buying that yet. I think it's fun to watch them. I don't see them shocking the world.
Yeah, and I love the top 3 players in that lineup here. Projected 1 through 3 is Abrams, Cruz, and Wood. All 3 of those guys, promising talent. So exciting. I mean, those 3 guys. I can't think of a trio that's even more exciting of young players coming into the season. I do love the addition of the veterans, Josh Bell, Nathaniel Lau. I think that they are going to help mold this team. Mentorship's going to be important. You mentioned the CJ Abrams stuff that happened with curfew in a casino. It's going to be balancing the development and also keeping these guys focused. They are in full a rebuilding team. Let's remember that. They're going to face inevitable growing pains. They're going to lose some tough games. the critical concern of pitching. You mentioned the unproven young arms, but there's a lot of talent here. I mean, Mackenzie Gore, as you referenced before, one of these guys could take the next step. But I think they're stabilizing their structure towards who they are. We mentioned last week about some of these teams that will finish last place or close to last place, but they don't have an identity. I think with the Nationals, this team clearly has a scope of who they will be in the future years. They have their core. They have 3 guys that they can really build around. And chances are one of these guys are going to hit. We already saw glimpses of it last year with James Wood. CJ Abrams has had glimpses. What are we going to get from a full season of Dylan Cruz? That's really exciting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Fangraphs has them forecasted for 73 wins. And if I'm a betting guy and like I haven't even put in futures or whatever, I would take the over if that is what they have over under. I think they're going to win over 73 games. There's going to be challenges, of course, but I see this team as at very least getting close to 500. Maybe they'll be a little bit below 500, but they're going to be a pest. They're going to be a team that's tough to play against. That's what they were last year. They played all their teams very, very tough. And they're energetic, and they're going to give a reason to come out to Nationals Park and buy some of these jerseys. I mean, you're going to see a lot of James Wood jerseys out there in DC, and they're going to capture the imagination and make people believe. I think they're going to go on some hot streaks during this year. Ultimately, especially the National League is so tough this year. In another world where the league is a little bit down and you have some other teams that aren't as good, they just play this National League East. You called it the Beast before, over and over again. They're going to get beat up when the in division. But in another world, this is the national team. I see why people think they can be projected to overcome and make a surprise playoff run. It's just the nature of where they're at right now in the division. Like I said, they're going to be playing these teams a lot. And it's going to be hard to play the Braves, Mets, and Phillies week in, week out. Maybe you can fatten up on the Marlins, but the Nationals themselves, they're going to be a tough out, but they're a year away, as you mentioned.
Yeah, you look at the lineup and it's like they have some good hitters out there, but they need someone with the pop, right? I think there are some people hoping that they went out and got a power bat this offseason. You could call Josh Bell that, but I don't know. Josh Bell, when he's good, he looks like that guy, but he's not going to, more than likely, he's not going to finish the season with 30, 35 home runs. Maybe he proves me wrong, but I would doubt that at this point in his career. But someone's got to be the muscle in that lineup where I feel like, CJ Abrams can pop some out of there for sure. Dylan Cruz might be a 20 home run dude. James Wood is the guy I'm looking at to see, is he going to be that guy? He can hit home runs to all fields. Is he a 40 home run guy one day? Maybe not this year, but one day. But really what's going to determine their future is the pitching, the young pitching, or if they can go sign some guys, because they're very young in the rotation. A guy like Travis Sakura, Harleen Susano, who guys are excited about down in the farm. Their ETAs are 2026, 2027. They've been impressing people. Maybe they can beat that, but they're going to need someone to step up. I'm looking at this year's draft. Number 1 pick, Washington Nationals. Seems like they have the number 1 pick all the damn time. Number 1 pick. You got some talented guys coming out in that draft on the bump. Jamie Arnold, I'm looking at you. Tyler Bremner, another guy out of Santa Barbara. Jamie Arnold out of Florida State. We're newfound college fans here. You guys know that if you listen to us. I'm looking at those 2 guys in Washington National, one of them in a Washington National uniform next year.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to take the bait for the college stuff because there's so much I want to talk about with the college baseball season that's been going on.
Soon we
will have a conversation about that, but that is exciting for the Nationals as they have a high draft pick to further emphasize the rebuild and expedite what they're going on. But let's head to the Miami Marlins. They're resident basement dwellers, and I think we're going to be all in agreement that they're going to be there this year as well. Of course, they're eagerly anticipating the return of their ace, Sandy Alcantara, and what we saw from him back in 2022, Cy Young winner, et cetera. His recovery from Tommy John is pivotal, not just because of what he's going to give on the field. I think he's going to bring people to the ballpark, but what they can get back to whatever their identity is going to be with the rebuild. I think he could secure a huge load, especially if he's going to be a guy that people are going to be building on. If he can prove he can stay healthy, you can also look at the eventual comeback of Yuri Perez as well. I think you can uplift the pitching staff, but maybe if they're like, we're not on par for where we want to be, maybe trade Yuri as well. I'm just saying if they're far away, you're looking at a prospect like Griffin Conine. If you're looking at what they're doing, what is the timeline for Yuri Perez? Are they because eventually his rookie contract's going to run out and you have to pay him. So I'm just looking at being realistic here.
No, I know you're actually.
I'm looking at it realistically for the Marlins because if we're being honest, what they did was they put themselves in the spot here where there's notable contributors gone. Jazz Chisholm Jr., he's gone. I mean, this is the case that it's been year after year. Jake Berger, he's gone. They're limited in power, limited in run production. They're clearly a team in flux. There are some bright spots that you could be, looking at as well. Xavier Edwards, I like what he brings to the table. I like Connor Norby. I really do. I mentioned Griffin Conine by name as well. I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity to play. That's one thing all these players will have opportunities to play. Kyle Stowers will have an opportunity to play every single day. There's an opportunity for these guys to go out and prove themselves. But you look at their new manager, they're embracing organizational change. Maybe that's going to signal stuff that is going on the right track, because there's been an identity crisis for years in Miami. What is the renewed commitment to develop players, have a foundation that is stable, and eventually win games? This is a proud franchise with 2 World Series, and they're nothing close to the competitive team that used to drive the Mets wild. The Mets could not beat them certain parts of the season. They had runs in between 97 and 03, winning World Series championships. They've been in the mud for quite some time now. And honestly, this may not have to do with play on the field, but it starts and ends with their goddamn uniforms. Can we get back to the old school fish, turquoise and black? Can we go back to what they are and start looking good, feeling good type of thing? I don't know. They're going to lose a lot of games. Pacoda is going to be looking at them as a difficult season. They're predicting around 61 wins. That's probably accurate. They're not going to be historically bad like the Chicago White Sox last year, but their immediate goal to me is clear here. They need to evaluate and develop the young talent that's in front of them, and they need to really focus on future success and not really focus on the immediate competitive success on the field right now. It's about seeing what they have here, who's going to be here for the next 5-6 years rather than who's going to be here this year.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say much better than that. You talked about the manager, Clayton McCullough, coming over from LA and winning culture. You have to hope that he gets the reputation here of someone that guys want to play for. Like if Xavier Edwards and a guy like Connor Norby are talking around the league, like putting this guy on a pedestal, saying how much they love playing for him, that's a good step in the right direction. They have a couple fun players, those 2 I just named. They always seem to have pitching. Like you look at their pitching, like their rotation, it's crazy because if it works out, I'm not saying they're going to make any noise because they don't have enough offense, but and I don't know what the bullpen will do, to be honest. I don't think anybody does. But rotation, like you got Sandy at the top, Edward Cabrera, who another guy that just cannot stay healthy, but when he's out there at his best, he's filthy. Ryan Weathers, who showed signs of being a breakout guy last year and then got hurt, lost a ton of weight in the offseason. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I think a lot of fantasy players have him on their radar as well. Cal Quantrill, like we know what Cal Quantrill is. He's guys going to hopefully eat innings for you, and some days it's going to be better than others. And Max Meyer, who once upon a time super high prospect, post-hype dude. If you have those 5 guys and you do get Yuri Perez back at some point, they can't trade that dude. That'd be such bullshit. But you're right. I'm not calling you out. Like I'm just saying, like they better not pull something that ridiculous. Like, listen, Sandy's going to be gone. I think their biggest hope is hoping they can throw Sandy out there for probably 5 innings at a time, which is crazy to think because he would led the league in complete games for a couple years there. Like he's the only guy going out doing that. But they want to protect their investment here, or their trade piece, I guess. If they can just throw him out there and be careful with him, and he puts up some good stat lines, and they leave some in the tank for somebody that acquires him. Remember, he has another year in his deal. There's no way I'm convinced they're going to pay him another $17 million next year. Like they don't want to pay anybody right now. There are so many teams that could be in the mix that have lots of good prospects. I'm talking about the Orioles, who made a deal with the Marlins last year and gave up a pretty good amount for frickin' Trevor Rogers. Like, what would they give him for Sandy Alcantara? And the Orioles are being called out by everybody for not doing enough. So maybe they finally, if they're in it still, go after Sandy. If the Orioles and the Cubs are both involved in the Sandy Alcantara sweepstakes at the deadline, those 2 systems are still freaking loaded, even though both of those teams have moved some guys. Like you have Agustin Ramirez, who a lot of people rave about, who they got from the Yankees in the Jazz deal. He's another guy that in the future people think could be really good. So it's weird because as bad as it is for the Marlins right now, the Marlins have done this a few times before where it actually doesn't take them that long to turn it around. And all of a sudden you're looking up and it's like Christian Yelich, Mike Stanton. Yes, Mike. And Marcelo Zuna out in the outfield. Oh, man, that's pretty good. Like, seriously, like there might be another version of that where we're looking up in a year or two and it's like, oh, the Marlins are a pain in the ass to play again. And then they deal those guys in a few years after. But yeah, you're looking at just the vibes. Do they like playing for the managers? Xavier Edwards turn into one of the best players in the league. and what do they do with Sandy? That's what everyone's looking at. Where does
Yeah,
Sandy
and
go?
I think there's got to be a reason to look at this team and similar to what we said with the Rockies, figure out in a quiet place, don't do it in front of the media, have a conversation about what is the realistic signal date of we're going to be competitive. And then you can make a decision on what you do with all these players. You mentioned Yuri Perez as well. The money he's making now is team friendly, but eventually a player like that, I mean, even though he's been hurt, the way pitching's paid, he's going to want to be paid. And unless they commit to it, which the Marlins should commit to it, by the way, I'm in agreement with you. I think that they should
Yeah.
agree. They should pay Yuri Perez. They should pay Edward Cabrera. If like these guys show up, you have pitching in house. You need to find a way to sustain it. You can't continue to develop it. It's just one of those things that doesn't grow on trees. I mean, even though the Marlins have a flux of young players that have potential, when you have guys that are established, you have to keep them in house. So we will see.
By the way, like Tigers too, if they're in the mix, the best farm system in the league. Like I know they have a really good looking rotation right now, but who knows what they need at that point? Tigers, Cubs, Orioles, all in the mix to try to grab another frontline starter.
Or the
Marlon, I
Dodgers.
mean Peter
The
Bendix,
Dodgers
yeah,
even too, right?
Dodgers. I mean they've have like 27 pitchers, but
I was
who
half
knows?
joking just to get the angry
No, I'm
reaction,
not
but
because
it's
this
true
happens
though.
every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Peter Bendix with that thought has to be like drooling or foaming at the mouth. But let's get to our predictions as far as 1 through 5, how many teams we think are going to make it, and our ultimate X factor. I'll let you start. For me, this was really hard. It's hard as a fan of a team in the division, especially in a good one. But give me your predictions.
So I have the Braves winning the division, just barely. They squeeze it out. I have the Mets getting in the playoffs as well as the second team in there. Phillies just miss out in the playoffs. Nationals finish in fourth. And then also I have the Marlins in dead last.
And do you have how many playoff teams do you have coming out?
Just the Mets and the Braves are coming out of this division.
Okay, so man, I did not think we'd be the same on this one. I think I've said this a couple times. The AL Central, when you had the Royals winning just like me, I was like, what? I definitely didn't think he was going to have them there. Our 1 through 5 wasn't completely the same in that one. It was a little different, but having them at the top, I was shocked. So again, so far, the AL West is the only one we've had different at the top. With you having the Mariners, me having the Rangers. I think the AL East is going to get messy because that's tricky. But I have the exact same 5, which I'm shocked about. I thought you would have the Phillies behind the Braves. I have the Braves at the top as much as I'd love to say I think the Mets are going to be there. The fact that the Braves were right there with us last year with all the injuries they went through is insanity. It's crazy. Like you could make the argument they don't even really need Acuna and Strider to be first place this year. They just need their other guys to like be healthy and have bounce backs. Like seriously. So I have the Braves until proven differently, I guess. I do have the Mets second, and I think between they and the Phillies is very, very close. It's a more of a gut feeling than anything. I feel like the Phillies are due for a little bit of struggle, and whether that's an age thing or just something else, I don't know. There's something in me that feels like they're due for a little bit of struggle and still be a very good team, but have to kind of claw their way to a playoff spot like they did a few years back when this run actually kind of started. And then the Nationals and the Marlins. So same 1 through 5. I have the Braves, Mets, and Phillies all making it. And to put my whole bracket together, and not in order because we're going to do that in a separate episode and make predictions of who's going to beat who. But if you remember, if you listened back to the NL West when we first started this, I had the Dodgers and Diamondbacks coming out of that division for the playoffs. The Cubs, only team out of the NL Central, which leaves me these 3 spots for the Braves, Mets, and Phillies to finish up here. And my ultimate X factor, man, there were so many ways I could go with this. I think it's Kodai Senga. I alluded to it before. The Mets pitching is a question more so than the Braves and Phillies. The Braves and Phillies have a little more sure things in those rotations, especially the Phillies. I think depending on what we get from Senga, positive or negative, it changes the feel of the Mets, but also the division.
So your argument about them not needing Acuna almost shifted me the other direction, but I still believe he represents the division's ultimate game changer. I think he's the X factor. If he comes fully returned to health, his previous MVP level form, or at least close to that, he could swing the NL East in Atlanta's favor in a big way, where there's not even a question that this division's in flux. I think this is going to be a dogfight all year. I don't think this is going to be settled by even early September. I think this is going to be a fight all year here. I just think Acuna is going to be a huge piece to what's going on in this division, and also the National League too. I think he's an X factor for the whole league at large. He's gonna shape what happens in 2025. His absence was felt last year, even though the Braves were able to be successful and be in the playoffs, etc. But when Acuna's on the field, he's a game changer. I mean, he's
Yeah.
one of the best players in baseball. And I think a lot of people forgot about that last year because he was gone and everyone's ready to write him off. And I think if once he gets back in May and he gets off to where he was, like, oh shit, I remember who he was. And here he is.
Yeah,
He's back on
it
the
is
field doing what he
crazy
does.
to think, like, if he's right, like, you have so many guys in that lineup that can hit 30, 40 home runs. Like Acuna, we know can hit 40. Austin Riley, pretty easy, can hit 30, probably can hit 40 as well. Matt Olson can hit 40 or 50. Like Ozzy Albies, if he ever stays healthy, can hit 30. It's nuts. It really is. It's crazy to think what that offense can do when they're all in the lineup. Like, it's scary. And then to have guys like Sale and maybe Strider and Schwellenbach in the rotation to boot, it's like, God damn, man. Like, can these guys stop taking team-friendly deals so they have to let some of these guys go? And Michael Harris, by the way, like, he could give you 20, 25 maybe on a good year. It's wild. So I'm there. I'm with you, unfortunately. I think it is the Braves division.
We appreciate you guys listening to this. Of course, this is our second to last episode of previewing the divisions. And of course, Devin, as you mentioned before, we'll be back tomorrow talking about the American League East. So go back in the archives if you missed any of them and check out all our division previews and see if you agree with them. I mean, we're getting ready for the season to kick off. As we mentioned, the Tokyo series is happening on Tuesday, and we have a lot to discuss as far as what's going to happen with the Cubs and the Dodgers. Then we have a little bit of a lull before the season actually kicks off, but a little appetizer for baseball as well. Getting some competitive baseball over in Japan. Wet the palate, of course. Curious to see what happens with Shota Imanaga and Yamamoto on the mound there. The fanfare, 6 a.m. start is not ideal as far as getting baseball the publicity, but at the end of the day, opening day is just right around the corner. Anytime we hit March Madness, which we had Selection Sunday today, it usually signals, okay, we get through March Madness and then baseball's right there waiting for us. So we're here at the finish line, guys. The cold is thawed, the ground's becoming softer, the sun's coming out, the days are longer, and baseball is a little bit closer to us.
Did you do your taxes yet?
I didn't. I have them ready to go. I'm usually much earlier, but
get them done. I got them done today. I hated it. I was just looking at, like, I do my own taxes and Tax Act if they want to sponsor us. It'd be a weird one. I'm a Tax Act guy. Tax Act. Okay. We're trying to get a sponsorship here. It'd be a weird partnership, but like we'll take what we can get. No, but I'm saying, man, you have March Madness coming up. You're gonna be distracted by that shit. And then the baseball season, bro, you better get these taxes in. The IRS is gonna come after you if you miss the deadline. That goes for all you baseball fans that are listening.
Yeah, pay your taxes. Erwin R. Shyster, Devin is out there telling what to do. We'll be back tomorrow talking American League. So we're our final divisional preview, and we'll talk to you after a while.